So let me tell you a little bit about the research that we did to get ready for this book. It took us 3 years to write, and we interviewed over 2,200 people around the world, asking them what would they be interested in for their next job. We also interviewed over 300 heads of HR, surveyed them to say, what are you doing to get ready for the next generation of workers coming in, and what people expect of any age group in their roles over the next few years. And then we featured over 50 case studies in the books that you have in your packet. So I'm going to just start, as we get ready to set up a panel discussion, I'm going to just start with kind of the big picture research, but I want you to know that we took this all the way down to the pragmatic. What can companies do now to get ready for the future? But let's start with a little bit of the big picture first. Sometimes it's helpful to just think about how much change we've gone through over the last decade. First off, when you think of the year 2000, for so many IT people in the room, what is it that you think of? Y2K? Y2K was going to be the big issue of the year 2000. Lots of things have changed over the last 10 years. When we thought about reading books, it was always through a physical textbook. Now when we think about reading books, Amazon reported that over Christmas, more books were sold to be e-delivered than in any other format, which is really interesting that there's been that much change in just the last decade. 10 years ago, the only way for us to really get together and network was to meet face-to-face. Now, over 500 million people are on Facebook. When you try and add up how many people are in any kind of social network around the world, of course, people are in multiple networks, but clearly it's over 1 billion people are in social networks around the world. And we have lots of ways of meeting virtually as well. 10 years ago, if you needed to leave a short message for someone, you called up and left them a voice message. Now, when you look at how many people are texting and twittering, it's just phenomenal. I was looking at my watch here because we're about 45 minutes in. So in the 45 minutes since we've been here, 1 million tweets have been sent. 1 million tweets in the world, which is pretty amazing how much is out there. And it's not that the companies moved, it's that other companies emerged in other countries and domains. And then, another big trend to look at is that look at where the big shifts are. It's the BRIC countries, Brazil, Russia, India, China. And I think the interesting thing about that is that it means that the talent that we might want to solicit for any of our companies could come from anywhere in the world when there's so many mega powerhouses around the world. And where we end up working, it's very easy for us. I mean, there's a person here in the room that worked for me at Sun that now works for Wipro, so based in India, and he lives in Australia. I mean, the amount of connectivity we've got from around the world is just absolutely amazing. Generational shifts are going to be really incredible too. Just to define some of the categories, just for definitional terms, this is based in the U.S. This population demographic is fairly consistent around the world. Most developed countries have this kind of a shift, even though not the exact numbers. If we think of people that were born, that are older than those born in 1946, those are the traditionalists, called the greatest generation, lived through World War II. From there until 64 are baby boomers. Most people have heard that term, the baby boomers. Generation X, between there and 76. Millennials between there and 97. And then after 97, just this next generation that we'll just call Gen 2020 for now. And if you look at, let's progress that through time and kind of look at what it was like in 2005. Probably most people in the room here were in the workplace in 2005 and knew that baby boomers made up nearly half the population. And when you think of any culture, of any organization, whoever is making up the biggest chunk of it is setting the culture of the organization. So for the last 3 decades, baby boomers have really been setting the context and culture of the organization in almost all developed countries. Although they might not be called baby boomers in other countries, there's still this kind of shift to that age demographic that was a global phenomenon. And then if you look at 2010, you start to see that baby boomers become a smaller percent of the organization. even though baby boomers might want to hold on to their jobs longer because of the global recession, they lost their jobs in greater numbers than any other age group. So this ends up still remaining a consistent number. And look that millennials are already starting to become a significant portion of organizations. When you talk to companies that are financial consulting firms or business consulting firms that rely on an influx of fresh talent, they'll talk about having 70 to 80% millennials in their organizations already. And then if you look at 2015, now you start to see that millennials are really a big chunk of the organization and comprising nearly half. Another interesting phenomena is that Generation X is so small in just the raw number of people in it that it never becomes the dominant culture. And then finally, in 2020, which is kind of why we wrote the book, is to say, by then, millennials are going to be a big shift, a big part of the organization. So let's kind of start with the premise, as I go through the next few slides here, that millennials are going to be shaping a big part of the culture of most organizations around the world. And so it's worth looking at what is it that they view and what is their experience. And the other thing that's interesting to think about at this point in the slides as well is that there are, when we think about these jobs that are going to come open, the senior level jobs that are either manager jobs or senior technical positions, people are going to be thrust into those jobs a decade or 15 years earlier than we've had to do in business for the last 20 years. Because we had so many baby boomers available, we could throw them into senior level jobs. There's not enough Gen X behind them. So the need for accelerating development is going to be intense. And one of the ways to accelerate development is to connect people through technologies and not rely on just the old-fashioned put them in a classroom. We're going to have to think of really interesting ways to accelerate development of people. So I am so glad that Pratik got the question about what comes after the collaborative revolution, because I also have on my slides that we are in the midst of the collaborative revolution, which is really just beginning. So when you look at kind of the whole shifts in the information revolution, it has not been that long in terms of human history that we've been, since the Industrial Revolution. And most people would argue that right now we're ending up the information revolution and just starting into the collaboration revolution. And in this collaboration revolution, some of the things that we wrote about in the book are how people are using technologies to connect consumers to help them design products, using competitors in what is now called co-opetition. Using all kinds of ways in which we've never thought of collaboration before. So I think his answer that there's a lot of struggles ahead to make the collaboration revolution real is a very valid conversation. So now let's think just a moment about what millennials want. And from our research, these are the rank orders that people gave us in terms of what they're looking for from their boss. This was in the June issue of Harvard Business Review, an article on leadership, the next generation of leadership. And so from their boss, the type 5 characteristics, number 1, is going to help me navigate my career path. And so when you think about in your own organizations, what are you doing to help people navigate their career paths? Because that's the number 1 thing people are looking for. The second one is, will give me straight feedback. This, by the way, was number 2 for every generation, that they wanted somebody who would give them straight feedback. Pausing just a second, we also asked 300 heads of HR what their managers were good at. And they rank ordered a set of 20 skills. Guess which one was dead last? Will give me straight feedback. So we've got a disconnect here between people being able to give managers being able to give straight feedback and what all of us expect from our managers on the job. Again, what they want from a company, somebody who's going to develop their skills for the future. They're no longer under the illusion, because their parents have all been laid off, practically, have gone through one layoff experience. They almost all know someone who got laid off from a company. So, so that what they care about is, are you going to develop my skills so I am marketable for the future? Has strong values, that was number one for every other generation. And then, will customize their options, blend work with the rest of their life, career path clear. So again, some really, common themes here. And then finally, what do they want to learn? So when we look at what is it that they're interested in learning, their technical skills was the number one thing that they wanted to learn about. And when you look at what a lot of learning, what CLOs, because I know a lot of chief learning officers as well, when you talk about what their areas that they focus on are, they tend to focus on compliance and leadership development, and not very much on technical development. And when you look at the technical development, it's usually embedded in the business units. But that is the thing that millennials are most interested in developing their capability on. So I think that's where it's going to be really interesting how we start to use technology to help people connect on developing in technical expertise. And then, some other things that you would, of course, expect them to be interested in. So, as I get ready to hand it off here, what's this going to mean for chief learning officers for the future? I already mentioned the need to accelerate development, because we're going to have these folks who are thrust into positions, very, very early compared to what we ourselves, if you're of the baby boomer generation, got thrust into roles. And we're going to have to learn as chief learning officers and as members of any generation older than the millennial generation to be comfortable using the tools that they're using. I hired someone about a year and a half ago at Sun who heard me speak, wanted to come to work at Sun, so I was kind of flattered and wanted to talk to him when he came into the organization, and I told him, at Sun, we had this big lawsuit with Microsoft, so we don't use Microsoft tools, so you're going to have to use an email tool that isn't Microsoft. There's a lot of open source solutions. I started rattling off the open source solutions, and he said, oh, it doesn't matter. I've never sent an email in my life, ever. So if you can imagine that. Because why would you use email, he said, if you've got Facebook, you've got instant messaging, you've got Twitter, and texting. Why do you even need? I don't even know why you need email, which I thought was just a really interesting perspective. So if we're going to communicate with them, we have to learn other methods of communication other than our traditional comfortable email method.